I bought a beach house for peace. But my son brought chaos. Welcome to TrueVoices. If you're watching this, like and subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. The morning sun melted through the glass walls of Eleanor's new beach house, gilding the room in a soft gold that promised calm. Seashells lined the windowsill like prayers, each one collected by trembling hands that had finally learned solitude after 40 years of marriage. Her husband, Richard, was gone 6 months now, his absence lingering like salt on the air. She bought the house to breathe again, to let grief wash away with the tide. It was supposed to be her sanctuary, but peace, she would soon learn, was fragile. Her son, Michael, arrived unannounced the first week. He had always been her favorite, her only child, the one she forgave too easily, defended too often. He came with smiles and promises of, "Just a weekend stay, Mom." But behind him trailed a caravan of noise. His wife's sister, their kids, their dog, and even a loud friend named Travis who brought beer before noon. In a single afternoon, the ocean's hymn was drowned by laughter that wasn't hers. Eleanor tried to smile as Michael kissed her cheek. "You don't mind, do you?" he asked, already dragging coolers through the hall. Her voice caught, her throat dry. "Of course not," she whispered, lying for love. For the first few days, she tried to convince herself it was temporary. But as the sun rose and fell, so did her patience. Her garden, once a place of morning prayer, was trampled by barefoot children chasing kites. The kitchen that once smelled of rosemary and baked bread now reeked of spilled beer and fried grease. Her son's laughter, once her comfort, now sliced through her quiet like a knife. On the 4th morning, she woke to the sound of voices arguing over her living room couch. Michael's wife had decided it would look better facing the ocean. They were moving her furniture, Richard's favorite chair included. "It's just furniture, Mom," Michael said, brushing off her trembling hands. "You should relax more. This house is too big for you anyway." Those words, "too big for you," echoed. It wasn't just the house they were taking. It was her space, her sovereignty, her silence. Eleanor smiled politely, walked to the balcony, and stared at the ocean. The waves crashed, relentless and proud, as if whispering reminders she had forgotten. Strength, boundaries, dignity. She inhaled deeply and tasted the salt of her own restraint. That evening the crowd grew. Friends of friends arrived, their cars lining her driveway like a takeover. Music blared. Someone spilled wine on her late husband's rug. Michael waved from across the deck, shouting, "We're celebrating life, Mom. Isn't that what Dad would want?" But Eleanor could see it, the entitlement masked as joy, the disregard dressed as family bonding. She saw her son becoming someone she didn't recognize, a man who used charm to cover greed. When the night settled and the guests drifted off to the beach bonfire, Eleanor sat alone by the mantel, the wedding photo watching over her. Richard's eyes seemed to question her silence. She reached for the frame, brushed dust from the glass and whispered, "You'd tell me to stand up, wouldn't you?" That was the night she decided. The next morning she rose before dawn. The sky blushed with the first light, and the ocean was calm again, as if waiting for her cue. She made breakfast, her calmest act of defiance, eggs, coffee, and toast laid neatly for two. When Michael stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, she greeted him with a warm smile. "Michael," she said softly, "I've decided to rent the house." He blinked. "Rent it? Why, you love it here." "I do," she replied, pouring coffee, "but it seems too lively for me. So I'll be moving out for a bit. Maybe the city." He shrugged, relieved. "That's perfect. We'll stay and take care of it while you're gone." Her lips curved faintly. "Oh, I know you will." What Michael didn't know was that the paperwork had been signed the night before. The new tenants were arriving the next morning, a quiet retired couple with no interest in family gatherings or chaos. She had sold the house to them, cash, and her lawyer had arranged every detail. By sunset, Eleanor packed her small suitcase, her late husband's photo tucked gently between her clothes, and placed a note on the kitchen counter. It read, "Michael, sometimes peace is not something you find but something you reclaim." When the family returned from the beach that evening, laughter echoing through the hall, they found the locks changed, movers outside, and a sold sign planted on the lawn. Michael's voice broke through the chaos. "Mom? Mom." But Eleanor was already gone, her car winding down the coastal road, wind in her hair, her face bathed in the gold of her new dawn. She stopped at a cliffside cafe overlooking the sea and ordered a cup of tea. The steam curled upward like her first breath of freedom. Around her the world was alive again, seagulls diving, waves whispering. And though a pang of sadness pressed against her ribs, it was the kind that comes with letting go. She took out her phone, glanced at the photo of her house one last time, and whispered to herself, "Peace isn't given, it's chosen." But as she lifted her cup, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. A photo appeared, her beach house, lights on, Michael standing outside with a look of fury she'd never seen before. The message read, "You'll regret this." Her heart stilled. She looked out at the ocean, the calm before another storm. The tide was coming in, relentless as ever. She smiled faintly, unshaken. Then let the tide come. Eleanor didn't go far. She checked into a quiet coastal in a few towns away, a place where the only sounds were the hum of ceiling fans and the whisper of waves through cracked windows. The owner, a silver-haired woman named May, gave her the corner room with an ocean view. "You look like someone who needs silence," May said kindly. Eleanor smiled. She did. But silence, she was learning, could carry its own unease. That night, she dreamed of footsteps in her beach house, echoes of laughter turning to shouts, of the photo frame crashing to the floor. When she woke, dawn had barely touched the horizon, but something restless stirred in her chest. She turned on her phone. Dozens of messages blinked on the screen. Missed calls. Then one text from Michael. "You think this is funny? That house was mine too. You're me, Mom." Her fingers trembled, not from fear but disbelief. The boy she raised with love and sacrifice, the boy who once cried into her lap when his first girlfriend left him, now sending threats over property. Grief twisted with anger in her stomach. She typed slowly. "You are always welcome in my heart, Michael, but not in my peace." Then she put the phone down. By afternoon, May knocked gently on her door. "You've got a visitor," she said. Eleanor's pulse jumped. She stepped out to find a man in a navy suit. Her lawyer, Mr. Ellis. "I thought I should let you know," he began softly. "Your son tried to contest the sale. He's claiming emotional distress, but he doesn't have legal grounds. Still, he's persistent." Eleanor sighed, her voice calm. "He's his father's son. Charming and stubborn. But he'll learn." Mr. Ellis hesitated. "Do you want a restraining order, Mrs. Weller?" She looked out at the water, the surf clawing against rocks. "No," she said finally. "A boundary is only powerful if it's respected willingly. If he crosses it, that's when I act." The next day brought rain, the kind that paints everything in silver melancholy. Eleanor sat by the window, watching droplets chase each other down the glass. A memory flickered. Her husband laughing as Michael built sandcastles, her younger self filming them, her heart full. She whispered, "Where did we lose him, Richard? Was it when we gave too much?" By evening, she decided to drive past the old beach road just once. The house loomed in the distance, its once golden walls now shadowed by clouds. She parked far enough not to be seen. The new owners were inside. Quiet, tidy, peaceful. But another car was parked at the edge of the driveway. Michael's. She watched him pacing near the gate, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly. Even from afar, she could see the desperation in his movements. He looked smaller somehow, swallowed by anger and regret. For a moment, maternal instinct flickered, that impulse to run to him, to fix, to forgive. But then she remembered the chaos, the noise, the way he'd said, "Too big for you." She stayed hidden, watching the storm rise over the ocean. When lightning split the sky, she started her car and drove away. The wind roared through the trees, and with every mile she put between them, her heart grew lighter, not out of vengeance but release. Back at the inn, she wrote a letter. No apology, no blame, just truth. "Michael, I spent years teaching you kindness and patience, hoping you'd learn peace from my example. But I realize now, peace cannot be inherited, must be earned. The house was never meant to be your burden or your prize. It was my farewell to pain. I hope someday you'll understand that love doesn't mean surrender. Your mother always." She sealed the envelope and left it with May to mail in the morning. But that night, as she stepped onto the inn's porch to breathe the rain-heavy air, a figure stood by the gate. Soaked, silent, familiar. Michael. Her heart clenched. His eyes met hers, storm-bright, filled with confusion more than fury. For a long moment neither spoke. The ocean's roar filled the space between them. "Mom," he said finally, voice raw. "Why would you do that to me?" She exhaled, steady and soft. "To save us both." He shook his head, stepping closer, his shoes splashing through puddles. "You left me with nothing. You still have everything that matters," she replied. "You just don't see it yet." The wind howled. Rain lashed against the porch roof. And in that fragile silence, something shifted, the mask of anger slipping to reveal a son who wasn't cruel, just lost. But then a shadow moved behind him. Travis, the loud friend from before, emerged from the darkness, cigarette glowing between his fingers. "Told you she'd be here," he muttered. Eleanor's pulse quickened. Michael turned, startled, and hissed, "Travis, go wait in the car." But the man didn't move. His grin was cold. "She owes you. We both know it." Lightning flared again, and for the first time, Eleanor felt fear. Not for herself, but for what this confrontation could become. She stepped back, her hand gripping the porch rail. "Michael," she said quietly, "you need to choose who you are right now." The son stared at his mother, torn between loyalty and pride, between the noise of bad influence and the pull of her unwavering calm. Rain poured harder, and in that blinding storm, his silence became its own confession. Then, just as thunder cracked above them, May appeared in the doorway behind Eleanor, holding a lantern. "Is everything all right here?" Travis's grin faltered. Michael took a step back. "We're fine," he muttered. But his voice trembled. Eleanor looked at him, her expression unreadable. Not anger, not pity. Just quiet strength. "Go home, Michael," she whispered. Before you lose what's left of yourself. He hesitated, then turned away, the storm swallowing him whole. Travis lingered a moment longer, glaring, then followed. The car engine roared to life, taillights cutting through the rain. Eleanor stood motionless as the red lights disappeared into the night. Only when the silence returned did she whisper, almost to herself. He's not gone, just drifting. But May's eyes narrowed. You think he'll come back? Eleanor looked at the horizon, where the sea met the storm, and the faintest tremor passed her lips. The tide always does. The wind rattled the windows again, not violently but like a warning. Somewhere out there, the waves were shifting, carrying something new toward shore. And Eleanor knew, this wasn't over yet. The storm broke overnight, leaving the morning wrapped in mist. The sea was calm again, deceptive in its softness, a mirror pretending innocence. Eleanor stood on the porch of the inn, a shawl over her shoulders, staring into the gray horizon where sky and water blurred into one. Sleep had been elusive. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Michael's face in the rain, a mix of guilt and defiance. A boy lost at the edge of manhood, and a man too proud to come home. May joined her quietly, offering a cup of coffee. He's not the first son to lose his way, she said gently. But he might be the first one with a mother who stood her ground. Eleanor smiled faintly, though her heart felt heavy. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted him to see me, not as his safety net, but as a person who deserves peace. May nodded. Sometimes love has to sound like distance. That afternoon, Eleanor went for a walk along the beach, where the tide had left behind a trail of broken shells and forgotten debris. She knelt to pick up a piece of sea glass, smooth, weathered, transformed by time. It glowed faintly in her palm, and she thought of her marriage, her years of quiet endurance, and how love could polish even pain into something beautiful. But her peace was short-lived. When she returned to the inn, May met her at the door, worry lining her face. You got mail, she said, handing her an envelope. The handwriting was bold, impatient. Michael's. Eleanor's fingers hesitated before she opened it. Inside was a single page. A typed message, cold and precise. Mother, you've made your point. But you embarrassed me. Everyone knows what you did. Even Dad's old colleagues. You think peace comes from running away. You taught me everything has a cost. So pay yours. You'll hear from me again. Eleanor folded the letter without a word. Her pulse steadied not from fear but from resolve. She went to her room, sat at the small wooden desk, and opened her laptop. There was something she had avoided for years. Her will. She updated it quietly, line by line, ensuring everything she owned would go to charity, scholarships, and the Coastal Wildlife Foundation she and Richard once supported. Not a cent to chaos. Not again. That evening, the sky burned gold, and she stood at the shoreline, letting the waves nip at her toes. For the first time in months, she felt Richard near, not as memory but as calm. The gulls circled above, crying like echoes of old promises. I'm doing what you'd want, she whispered. I'm choosing peace, even when it hurts. But the next morning, tranquility shattered. May knocked frantically at her door. Eleanor, your old beach house. There's been an incident. Her breath caught. What happened? The police called. The new owners found the place broken into last night. Nothing stolen, just damage. Windows shattered, furniture overturned, photos ripped. They said your son's car was seen nearby. Eleanor sank into the nearest chair. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The house that symbolized her rebirth had become a battlefield. She pressed her palms together and whispered. He's drowning in anger. May placed a hand on her shoulder. You can press charges. Eleanor shook her head slowly. Not yet. Sometimes destruction is just a cry for recognition. But if he crosses the line again, I'll let the tide take its course. That afternoon she drove back toward the beach, not to confront but to see. Police tape fluttered against the salt wind, and the house stood in solemn ruin. The new owners were outside, speaking to an officer. When they noticed her, they nodded with compassion, as though understanding this pain wasn't entirely new. Eleanor walked closer. The sea wind tugged at her hair as she looked through the broken window. Her reflection flickered in the glass, older, wiser, wounded but unbroken. She reached into her purse and pulled out the sea glass she'd found that morning, laying it on the porch railing like an offering. You'll heal too, she murmured, as if speaking to the house itself. Behind her, footsteps crunched on gravel. A familiar voice said, You didn't have to come, Michael. He turned. He stood a few yards away, drenched in guilt, his hands buried in his jacket pockets. The defiance was gone. What replaced it was exhaustion, the kind that eats at a person from the inside. Did you do this? She asked quietly. He looked at the house, then at the ground. I just wanted to see it again, to see what you chose over me. But Travis, he got drunk. Things got out of hand. Eleanor's heart tightened. And you let him. He didn't answer. The silence said enough. I didn't choose the house over you, Michael, she said softly. I chose myself. For once. He looked up, eyes wet. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I know, she said. But meaning doesn't erase the damage. A siren wailed faintly in the distance. Michael glanced toward it, panic flashing across his face. They're going to arrest him. Travis. Maybe me too. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. You made your choices. Now you live them. But if you still have a shred of the boy I raised, the one who used to collect shells with me, you'll take responsibility and make it right. His lip trembled, and for a brief second, she saw that boy again, the child who once promised to take care of her when she grew old. He nodded barely. I'll fix it, he said hoarsely. Eleanor turned back toward the sea. Fixing it starts with yourself. As the police car pulled into the driveway, Michael froze. The officer stepped out, calling his name. Eleanor didn't move. She simply watched, her face a mask of grace and grief. He looked at her one last time before walking toward the officer, hands raised. When the car drove away, she stood alone by the broken window, wind lifting her hair like silver silk. The waves crashed harder now, as if applauding the painful act of letting go. She closed her eyes and whispered, now maybe the storm can rest. But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A flicker of movement behind the dunes. A figure watching from the distance, still as a shadow. Not Michael. Too tall. Too still. She frowned, heart skipping. When she looked again, the figure was gone. Only the seagrass swaying where it had stood. The air felt heavier, charged. Peace, she thought, might not come as easily as she hoped. Somewhere behind her, the waves whispered again. Not in comfort this time, but in warning. The sun rose pale and uncertain over the horizon, painting the waves in muted silver. The beach was quiet, almost too quiet, as Eleanor parked her car near the broken remains of the house that had once been her refuge. The sea breeze tugged at her coat, carrying the faint scent of salt and smoke. The police had come and gone, the damage catalogued, the evidence bagged. But one thing lingered in her mind, that shadow she'd seen the day before. It hadn't been Michael. She stepped onto the porch, her shoes crunching over shattered shells. The air inside the house was colder than it should have been, as though grief itself had settled in the walls. The new owners had decided to move out temporarily, leaving behind the echo of what was once home. Eleanor walked through each room slowly, her fingertips grazing familiar textures. The wooden banister Richard had built, the wall where Michael's childhood height marks were still faintly visible beneath the paint. She paused by the mantel where her wedding photo once stood. The space was empty, yet she felt watched. She turned toward the window, nothing but gray sea and rolling fog. Still, a tremor passed through her. A voice broke the silence behind her. You shouldn't have come back here alone. Eleanor froze. The voice was rough, unfamiliar. She turned slowly. A man stood in the doorway, Travis. His face was shadowed, his eyes bloodshot. Michael's in jail, he said flatly. Because of you. Eleanor's heartbeat quickened, but her voice remained steady. Because of his choices. He laughed bitterly. You think you're better than us. Sitting in your quiet little world, acting like you didn't raise him into the man he became. Her spine straightened. Maybe I did. But I'm not the one breaking into homes. He took a step closer, hands in his pockets. You ruined him, you know. He just wanted your attention. Your approval. Now he's locked up, and you're here pretending you won. Eleanor's pulse thudded, but she didn't move. The room was dim except for the soft light filtering through torn curtains, catching dust in golden streaks. She stood tall in it, her silhouette sharp against the light. Winning isn't what I wanted, she said. Peace is. Travis shook his head. You don't get peace after what you did. He took another step forward. Eleanor's gaze flicked to the phone in her hand, her thumb hovering over a single button. May's number, already dialed but unsent. Leave, she said quietly. This house doesn't belong to you. Or to me. Not anymore. Travis's jaw tightened, but he hesitated. Something in her tone, calm, unflinching, cut through his anger. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She simply stood there, unshaken, as if the tide itself had drawn a line between them. Finally, he scoffed and turned toward the door. You think you've seen the last of us, old woman? You'll see. He'll come back for what's his. She didn't answer. The door slammed, and the echo rolled through the empty rooms like thunder. Eleanor stood there a long time, breathing in the quiet that followed. Her hand trembled slightly as she called May. Can you send someone from the inn? Just in case. May's voice was steady. I'm already on my way. By the time May arrived, the fog had lifted and the light turned warm again. They walked together along the shoreline, the sea gentle at their feet. You know, May said softly, sometimes peace isn't found in silence. It's found in choosing not to fight anymore. Eleanor smiled faintly. Then maybe I've finally learned that. They stood for a while, watching the horizon shimmer. A police car passed by in the distance, heading toward town. May squeezed her hand. He'll face his own lessons. You've done your part. Eleanor nodded, feeling something uncoil inside her chest. Not triumph but release. He's still my son, she whispered. I'll love him, even from afar. But I won't lose myself again. The waves rolled closer, cool against her ankles, erasing footprints as quickly as they were made. Days passed, then weeks. The house was repaired, sold again, its history tucked neatly away under fresh paint and laughter from new owners. Michael remained in custody for a time, attending mandatory counseling. He wrote once, a short letter, unsure, apologetic. Mom, I'm trying to understand. You were right, I let people use me and I used you to feel better about it. Sorry. Maybe someday we can walk by the ocean again. Eleanor read it sitting on the porch of the inn, a warm cup of tea in her hands. She didn't cry. She simply folded the letter and smiled softly. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about setting both of them free. That night, as the sun sank beneath the waves, she walked down to the water's edge. The sea shimmered in orange and gold, endless and patient. She bent to pick up a small shell and held it to her heart. For every storm, she whispered, there's a calm that follows if you have the courage to wait for it. Behind her, the inn lights flickered on, glowing warmly against the dusk. She turned, the wind brushing her hair across her face, and for the first time in a long while, she felt completely still. No anger, no fear, no regret. Just the rhythm of her breath syncing with the sea. But as she began to walk back, a car slowed on the distant road. Headlights swept across the sand, pausing on her figure before fading into the night. She didn't see who it was, but her heart stirred, not with dread but knowing. Michael had found her again. And this time maybe it wouldn't be for chaos. The tide whispered around her ankles, carrying the promise of another beginning. The air that evening was heavy with salt and silence, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath. Eleanor stood on the porch of the inn, the tea in her hands growing cold as headlights faded into the darkness. She hadn't seen the driver's face, but something deep in her bones told her it was him. Michael. He'd found her again. But whether he came with peace or turmoil, she didn't yet know. The sea murmured in the distance, its rhythm steady as a heartbeat. May stepped outside beside her, her shawl drawn tight against the breeze. You saw him, didn't you? She asked quietly. Eleanor nodded. I think so. May's gaze softened. You going to talk to him? Eleanor looked down at the road that led to the inn's parking lot, shadowed under the tall palms. If he's come to speak, I'll listen. If he's come to fight, I'll walk away. That night, sleep hovered but never stayed. Every creak of the old inn made her heart stir. When dawn finally came, pale light spilled through the curtains like mercy. She dressed slowly, wrapped a scarf around her neck, and stepped outside. The air was cool, fresh, the scent of seaweed and renewal. She walked along the shore, the horizon painted in watercolor hues of pink and silver. Then she saw him, standing near the rocks, alone, shoulders hunched. No Travis, no noise, just Michael. He turned as she approached. His eyes were tired but clearer than before. You always did like to walk by the water, he said quietly. Eleanor stopped a few steps away. It's where I remember who I am. He nodded, kicking at the sand. I don't even know who I am anymore. She studied him. This man who was once her little boy chasing kites, now a silhouette of regret. Then maybe it's time to start over, she said. You can't undo what's done, Michael. But you can choose what comes next. He swallowed hard. I wanted to hate you, Mom. When you sold the house, I thought you were punishing me. But now I get it. You were saving yourself, and maybe trying to save me too. Her eyes softened. Love doesn't always sound like approval. Sometimes it sounds like letting go. Long pause. The ocean sighed between them. I turned Travis in, Michael said finally. Told the police the truth. He's facing charges for the break-in. They're letting me do community service instead. Counseling too. Eleanor exhaled, slow and steady. That's good. I'm not asking you to forgive me yet, he said, voice cracking. But I needed you to know I'm trying. She stepped closer, her hand trembling slightly as she reached out and touched his face, a simple, fragile gesture that bridged years of silence. You don't have to earn my forgiveness, she whispered. You just have to stop running from yourself. For the first time, his eyes filled with tears, not of anger but release. He nodded, unable to speak. The waves crashed louder now, the tide swelling between their feet. It was as if the ocean itself was marking this moment, washing away everything that didn't need to remain. When they walked back toward the inn, May was waiting at the porch with 2 mugs of coffee and a knowing smile. I'll take that as a good sign, she said softly. Michael smiled faintly, wiping at his eyes. You could say that. They sat together, the three of them, watching the day awaken, the gulls, the sun, the shimmer on the water. There were no grand apologies, no speeches. Just quiet, the kind that healed. As the morning stretched on, Michael stood and said, I'll head back soon. I need to finish my hours. But maybe I'll come by next week. Eleanor nodded. You'll always find me here. When he drove away, the sound of his car blended with the ocean breeze. Soft, distant, hopeful. Eleanor stood by the porch rail long after he was gone. Her heart strangely light. He turned to May. He's learning. May smiled. So are you. That evening, Eleanor walked down to the shore again, alone this time. The tide was low, revealing smooth stones and glass worn soft by years of turmoil. She picked one up, green and gleaming in the fading light, and slipped it into her pocket. It felt like closure, like a circle completing itself. But as she gazed toward the horizon, she noticed something half buried in the sand. A small wooden box, water-worn and cracked. Curious, she knelt and dug it out, brushing off salt and grit. Inside was a sealed envelope wrapped in plastic, the ink faint but legible. For Eleanor Weller. Her breath hitched. The handwriting, unmistakable. Richard's. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The paper was yellowed, dated the year before he died. My darling Eleanor, if you ever find this, it means life has carried you back to the place where it all began. I wanted you to have peace, even if I wasn't there to see it. Promise me something. Don't let the ones you love drown you. Let them learn to swim on their own. You were always the tide in our lives. Strong, steady, inevitable. Don't fade into stillness. Keep moving, love. Keep becoming. Her tears came silently, not from sorrow but gratitude. She folded the letter and pressed it to her heart, the waves whispering around her ankles as if answering him. When she looked up, the sky was alive with color, gold bleeding into crimson, the sun descending in brilliance. Eleanor smiled through her tears. I kept my promise, Richard. Let go. And I'm still moving. She turned back toward the inn, her shadow stretching long across the sand. Behind her, the sea shimmered, endless, forgiving. Ahead, the lights of the inn glowed like a welcome. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. Not haunted, not burdened, just whole. And as night fell over the shore, Eleanor whispered into the wind. Peace at last. The waves answered softly, carrying her words into the dark. A promise kept, and a new beginning waiting just beyond the tide. The morning after the letter, the world felt changed. Not louder, not different, but clearer. The air along the coast carried the scent of wet earth and salt, and the gulls called in slow circles above the breaking waves. Eleanor stood at the edge of the water, the hem of her skirt brushing the foam, the letter from Richard folded neatly in her palm like something alive. She whispered to the sea. You always did find a way to speak, even without words. The wind tugged at her gray hair, and for a heartbeat, she thought she heard his laugh in the hiss of the surf. Back at the inn, May was setting the breakfast tables when she came in. You look lighter, May said. Eleanor smiled. I found something I wasn't looking for. May nodded, as though she didn't need details. Sometimes life hides the answers in places we left too soon. Eleanor sipped her tea, her gaze lingering on the road that led away from the beach. Michael hadn't called yet. She wasn't sure if he would. But she'd learned not to chase what wasn't ready to return. Healing, she realized, had its own timing. Later that afternoon, she sat by the window, pen in hand, writing in her journal. Something she'd started after Richard's passing but had abandoned during the storm of family conflict. Her handwriting was slower now, deliberate, each word an anchor. Peace is not the absence of storms. It's the choice to stand still while the tide changes. The inn's bell jingled. May poked her head in. You have another letter. Eleanor took it, curiosity stirring. The handwriting was unfamiliar this time. Neater, careful. Michaels. Mom, they let me out early for good behavior. I wanted to call, but I thought a letter might say more. I've been going to therapy. I'm learning that anger is just grief with no place to go. I think I was angry at Dad, at life, at you, for moving forward when I couldn't. I understand now why you sold the house. You weren't pushing me away. You were teaching me how to stop taking what wasn't mine. If you'll let me, I'd like to visit next Sunday. I'll bring breakfast. Just us this time. Eleanor smiled, tears brightening her eyes. She folded the letter, placed it beside Richard's and whispered, You'd be proud of him now. The days passed softly after that. She and May planted flowers by the porch, lavender and wild roses, the kind Richard used to bring home from the market. The inn filled with laughter again, travelers passing through, their joy blending with the hum of waves and distant music from the village pier. Sunday came with sunlight, warm and forgiving. Eleanor dressed in pale blue, her favorite color, the one Richard once said made her eyes look like morning sky. When Michael's car appeared on the road, she didn't feel fear this time, only calm. He stepped out, carrying a paper bag that smelled of coffee and fresh croissants. No bravado, no tension. Just humility and hope. Hi, Mom, he said, voice small but steady. Hi, love, she answered. They sat on the porch, the ocean glimmering beyond the dunes, and ate in silence for a while. It wasn't awkward, it was healing. Every word between them was careful, gentle, like patching a sail after too many storms. At one point, Michael said, I went by the beach house. The new owners planted flowers where the fence used to be. It looks peaceful. Eleanor nodded. It deserves peace. So do you? He looked at her, guilt still flickering behind his smile. Do you ever wish things had gone differently? She thought about it, about the chaos, the heartbreak, the strength it took to reclaim her life. No, she said finally. Because we both had to break to understand what was worth keeping. He blinked back tears. I don't deserve your kindness. She reached out, her hand resting gently on his. Kindness isn't about deserving. It's about love surviving what pride tried to kill. The sea breeze swirled around them, carrying their laughter as the sun began to sink. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt like time wasn't taking something from her. It was giving something back. As the sky deepened into amber and violet, Michael stood. "I'll come again next week," he said. "Maybe we can walk the shore together." "I'd like that," she said. When he left, she stayed by the porch rail, watching the horizon. The sun slipped below the waterline, and the first stars blinked awake. Small lights scattered over the vast, forgiving dark. May joined her with 2 cups of tea. "You found your ending," she said. Eleanor smiled faintly. "Not an ending. Just a quieter chapter." She sipped her tea, letting the warmth fill her chest. The waves rolled in, unhurried, each one a reminder that peace, once claimed, never truly leaves, it just changes form. As night deepened over the shoreline, the waves whispered like a lullaby, soft, unbroken, eternal. Eleanor stood by the water's edge, her reflection trembling in the silver wash of moonlight. The tide reached for her feet, cool and gentle, as if the sea itself were blessing her release. She closed her eyes and let the wind carry her final breath of gratitude into the night. The past had been heavy, but it no longer owned her. The house, the heartbreak, the noise, all had served their purpose. What remained was the quiet strength of a woman who chose peace over pride, forgiveness over fury, love over loss. She turned toward the inn, its golden lights glowing through the mist like a promise. The sound of laughter drifted from the porch, travelers sharing stories, new beginnings being written in the very place she had once come to hide. For a moment she looked back at the sea, her eternal witness, and smiled. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice steady, sure, "for teaching me that peace isn't something we find. It's something we become." The waves answered softly, folding into one another beneath the moon. And as she walked back toward the light, her heart finally still, her spirit quiet and free, the story that began in grief ended in grace. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to comment below. You never know whose story might be told next.